I discovered the power of saying no a long time ago. And boy, was that a terrific thing to learn. I was able to push all the stuff out of my life that I didn't enjoy or didn't like, sometimes doing it for people I didn't enjoy or didn't like. Ooh, I hate to say that, but you know it's true. No is a great and powerful word. But I have to tell you something. I've discovered something even more powerful than saying no, and that's saying yes. So let's talk about it. Hey, if we haven't met, I'm Kelly. I started Brain Flowers as a place for us to talk about all the wild curveballs that life is giving us now that we're in our 50s and our 60s and beyond. Now, saying yes is a game changer, a total game changer. And stick with me through this video as I talk more about it. It is empowering, it is creative, and it's going to fill your life in a way that saying no could never do. Let's start by talking about why we don't say yes as often as we say no. There is a universal truth, and it may be a little uncomfortable, but we're afraid, all of us, even me. We're afraid of failing, or so we tell ourselves. But you know what I believe? I believe we're afraid of succeeding. Failing is familiar. We've all failed. But few of us have actually succeeded in the areas that are really very important to us. And we know that when we do succeed, everything changes. Everything changes. We know exactly what failure looks like because we've been there before. So it's a lot easier to say no and at least get rid of the stuff we hate doing, but so much harder to say yes, because yes means we're trusting ourselves. And when we trust ourselves, we have a shot. We have a shot at succeeding. And success is some scary stuff. Now, I'm going to be personal and frank at the moment. There are lots of things that I have been afraid of. I have been afraid of losing people and wondering what my life would look like with them not in it. I have been afraid of dating. So scary. I've even been very, very afraid to start this YouTube channel. I started it in terms of reserving the channel name, etc. in April, and it took me until September to upload my first videos. Now, that seems pretty pathetic, but I needed that time to pedal myself faster and faster towards the yes that I really, really wanted. So ask yourself, what are the two things right now that you are fearing the most, that if you turned your no into a yes, would totally transform your life? Many, many moons ago, I had a wonderful therapist who once asked me this question. What is the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? And now I frame so many of my decisions in that. What's the worst thing that can happen? Now, sometimes the worst thing that can happen is really terrible, so I don't make that decision. But if the worst thing that can happen, even though it might be painful, can be fixed or remedied, if it was the worst thing that could happen, then I started to lean towards saying yes. Now, I'm the type of girl who loves to go on road trips, who loves reading great stories. I'm fascinated by the frontiers that mankind has crossed, be they on land or in space or below the ocean. So I started to think about things as an adventure. I would say, okay, this isn't scary. It's just an adventure. Let's have an adventure. And adventures are fun. Adventures are exciting. They're not filled with all this pain and all this trepidation. Boy, I love that word. And I started making choices based on my consideration of them as adventures. There's nothing won or lost in an adventure. It's an experience that you have. And by thinking that way and really shifting my mindset, I opened up so many doors in my life. I was able to change careers, or at least shift within my career multiple times. And turns out I really, really enjoyed that. I was able to travel places that I didn't ever consider. And gosh, I love that. I have no problems traveling on my own now or going out and eating on my own. I've said yes to all of those things. And every time I have, I'm telling you from my heart, every time I have, what has come into my life as a result of doing that is so much more enriching, so much more fulfilling than anything that I could have ever pushed out of my life. When you push stuff out of your life, you can regain your sanity, and that's important. Your equilibrium, super important, but you're not putting anything in. You're not putting anything in. And the last time I took a long 3-week vacation by myself, traveling throughout the Southwest, my friends were like, "What are you doing exactly?" And I just said to them, "I'm filling up my cup. I'm filling up my cup. I am replenishing myself. I am seeing these things. I'm having these adventures, and they are fuel for my happiness." And I encourage you to start thinking about these choices that you can make in terms of saying yes to an adventure. By doing that, I didn't know it at the time, but I was cultivating a growth mindset. A growth mindset is a positive mindset that looks for expansion of who you are. I'm a true believer in that life is so short and so precious that we want to fill it up with as many wonderful things as we possibly can. And by thinking about my choices in a way that asks me, is this going to be a thing that's going to grow me? I have often told students or coworkers that I've had, if you are choosing between two choices and they're both equally good, like not one of them is bad for you, choose the one that's more difficult, more challenging. There, that's where you grow, and that's where you change, and that's where your life gets infinitely better. I promise you on that one. I think I need to inject a little bit of a PSA here. I'm not talking about gambling, okay? I'm not talking about rolling the dice on something that's inherently risky. And risk is only something each of us can define. But I encourage you to think whether or not something actually is risky. And as my old therapist said, what's the worst thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? If you can imagine a comeback from that, then I think it's worth taking the risk. Let me give you a couple of easy examples from my personal life. I had 2 cats for a long time. They lived to 17 and 18 years old. And that is a big chunk of your life. And they were a joy. They were a brother and sister. After they died, I waited literally decades to adopt a pet on my own. And I recently adopted a new cat who was from a crazy situation. And she has just been a ball of sweetness. Why did I wait all that time? Why did I wait? Was I afraid? Was I worried about the responsibility? When I adopted her from the shelter, the people there kindly said to me, if for any reason this cat doesn't work out for you, don't hesitate to call us. And I appreciate the fact that they took the risk out of that decision for me, but I only regret not having made that decision so much earlier. Now, a pet is a big responsibility, and it may or may not be something you can fit into your life. But there are a million little stories like that. One of my favorites is actually my sister's story. My sister had a colleague, and they were both real estate agents at the time. And it was a Christmas season. And my sister says to this woman, you know what? Why don't we decide that next year We are going to say yes to everything. We are going to say yes to every invitation, every meeting, every connection we could possibly make, and see where it leads us. Now, this came up because they were talking about an industry event that night that neither of them wanted to go to. But based on that conversation, they both said yes. They got their best outfits on, off they went. And that woman met the love of her life that night. And they have been happily married for, my God, it must be 15 years now. That is the power of saying yes. That is the power of bringing things into your life. I'm not even saying you have to visualize it or manifest it. I think those things are great. But this is just putting your hand on the doorknob and turning the doorknob and walking through. Saying yes is magical. Just to be clear, yes by itself isn't a magic word. It's what happens to you after you say yes. It's the people that you meet. It's the skills that you learn. It's the things that you see. And you don't have to travel far to see new things, believe me. There's plenty like on your block. Those are things that come into your life like raindrops and create such richness. I think saying no is important. And you know that there are a lot of things we all carry around in our life that we should be saying no to. All I'm asking is that you dribble in some yeses every now and then and see what it can do for you. This isn't even about being brave on a grand scale. I'm talking about being brave for the next step. I want to say one more thing about the magic of yes. As we get older, we all share some common experiences. And one of those experiences is feeling more alone and lonely. I do a whole video on that. But we all have a little bit of loneliness, a little bit of an unfulfilled feeling in us as we get older. And that's because our roles are shifting. Saying yes not only gives you experiences, but it brings you people. It brings you community. I said yes to a friend of mine who needed a place to stay during COVID for the summer, all right, not for a weekend. That was a brave decision at the time because how would I like living with someone? I haven't lived with somebody in forever. It was single-handedly the best decision I made in the last few years. Through him, I was able to meet other new friends. We had our own COVID bubble. From one of the people, I learned a lot about gardening, and I have all these amazing flowers that inspired the name Brain Flower that I grow in my garden now. We're able to talk about cooking. My friend who stayed with me is an amazing baker, and while I could absolutely never recreate his confections, I did get better. So saying yes in a way helps us really, really work out one of those horrible issues, that of loneliness and being alone, in the sense of being less fulfilled that many of us have as we get older. Hope you found all of this meaningful. You might enjoy one of my other videos. I wish you happiness. Until next time, go pick yourself some brain flowers.